The Last of Us Season 2 Episode 4 came out, and I have so much to say about it. We're going to break down the episode. I'm going to give my thoughts on everything, the differences between the show and the game. There's a lot of changes here that I was really worried about with previous episodes that I'm not really worried about anymore. We're going to talk about everything, but before we get started, we're really close to 3,000 subs. I really want to try and hit 3,000 before the end of this month. I'm turning 25 this month too, so hey, if you want to give me a little birthday present, just hit that subscribe button. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about this episode that honestly blew my mind. In the game, Day 1 in Seattle is this long expedition where you find the WLF, you fight the WLF, you explore Seattle. It's just a whole long portion of the game. And I was very interested in seeing how they were going to pull that off. What are they going to cut? What are they going to add? Are they going to mush things together? And long story short, they did. And I was worried because I feel like we would have missed out on certain things, but I don't think we did miss out on anything. In fact, I think the way that they told this story, or this part of the story, is just as good in the game, if not maybe even a little bit better. I know that sounds absolutely crazy for me to say, considering part 2 is like my favorite video game of all time. So let's go ahead and talk about what I'm talking about. First off, we get an actual opening that goes into the backstory of Isaac. Isaac did have a little bit of a backstory and a just general story in the game, but he was definitely more of a lesser important side character. It seems like we're going to be getting a lot of Isaac content in this season, and that's really exciting because Jeffrey Wright's performance in just this opening scene alone makes me really want to see him in other episodes down the line interacting with Dina or Ellie or other characters. A tiny little spoiler for the game, we know he interacts with Abby and her crew, so I'm really just looking forward to that. But we get an introduction to Isaac here and an amazing cameo performance by Josh Peck, which, guys, that dude needs to be in more movies and shows because he's actually a fantastic actor. But Isaac turns against these Fedra soldiers and joins the WLF, and we kind of jump back to Ellie after that in the present day. So as of right now, we've got a brand new opening introducing Isaac, way deeper than we ever got in the game, and now we're going to the stuff that's really in the game in terms of the first day of Seattle, and this episode is called Day 1. Similar to the game, we do get Ellie and Dina exploring the shops around Seattle, and I loved how they just actually showed looting, which is such a big part of the game. And then we get a scene that's pulled directly from the game where Ellie sings Aha's Take On Me to Dina. What's so crazy is in the game, this is completely optional. You don't even have to do this. In fact, a lot of people miss it. So I'm really glad that they brought this into the show and made it fully just canon. And Bella honestly has a great voice. I loved her performance of this song, and I really think that what they do with Dina here is really make her kind of fall in love with Ellie even more, and we'll get into that later because that's kind of the center point of this whole episode, but I really like how they kind of lean into that a little bit, considering Dina and Ellie aren't technically in a relationship at this point in the show, whereas they were in the game. A beautiful scene. I'm sure we're going to be getting more guitar scenes later on in the show, but let's move on. Real quick, I also do want to say Bella Ramsey looks a lot older in this episode, and I wasn't, too sure on how her look would be for the second season, considering Ellie ages up quite a bit, but she looks fantastic here as Ellie. I'm really being sold into her character now. So we have Dina and Ellie exploring Seattle, and then we cut over to Isaac. We got his introduction at the beginning of the episode, but now we're here current day where he's the leader of the WLF fighting against the Seraphites or the Scars. I thought this was a masterfully written and masterfully shot scene because we have Isaac talking about all of these different things that aren't making much sense. We don't know who he's talking to, and then we find out he's using this frying pan that he's been talking about that he's really in love with to torture somebody. Comparing the old world where he always wanted this frying pan to cook great dishes, now he gets it eventually, just not in the way he thought. So Isaac is torturing this Seraphite, and this is definitely sort of a allegory for the cycle of violence that Ellie is going to be going on in order to get revenge on Abby for killing Joel. But we have the Seraphites in the WLF thinking they're both right, going back and forth, breaking truces, killing their own people. It's just an endless cycle of war. This is also another brand new scene that's not in the games, and I'm very happy that they added it because it shows more of that cycle of violence from an outside point of view, not directly from Abby or Ellie. Again, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with Isaac here in this season because he's already got a deeper kind of connection with the audience and more time with the audience than he really got in the game at all. Ellie and Dina then reach the TV station, which is a very important part in the game because this is where you're first getting real exposure to the Seraphites or the Scars, and they've been portrayed as the victim mostly here in this show so far, but now we're seeing them being the perpetrators with the WLF WLF being the victims. It's a very gruesome scene with these bodies hanging and their guts being pulled out. It's very graphic. It's a very eerie scene in the game, and it's also very eerie in the show because right after this, we have the attack that leads to Ellie and Dina going underground and then everything that happens there. The WLF chases them down into the train station tunnels, and there's also infected there. Just like in the game, Ellie pins the infected against the WLF, that way they can just go through, but in this scenario, there's tons more infected. They nailed the tension here because this scene lasts much longer than I think the scene lasts in the game, and we actually don't get the scene in the game where Ellie is breathing in spores and Dina finds out that she's immune. This actually happens in a way different way that I really liked even more than the game. I know I'm saying the game a lot, I'm comparing it to the video game, but this is what this show is based off of, and I love it so much, so I can't help but make comparisons. All that's to say is that I'm really loving the changes that they've made in this episode. Instead of Ellie breathing in spores for Dina to find out that she's immune to the virus, she actually gets bit by protecting Dina. This leads to them escaping to the theater where they hide out, and we actually get a brand new scene where Dina is pointing a gun at Ellie because she thinks she's going to turn, and it was really tense because while I know how this is going to end, it was still very nerve-wracking because you see the emotion in Dina's face and in Ellie's face. The acting was great. She's doing exactly what everybody else would be doing in this scenario. And not only that, Dina also has a secret of her own that she's been keeping. It was really hard not to talk about it last week because we saw signs of Dina being sick, and of course we find out in this episode she's pregnant. And after both of these secrets are revealed to one another and they find out everything's going to hopefully be okay, the two engage in a very romantical activity. They are wrestling. In the game, this scene actually takes place at the very beginning before Joel's death, and I think it may fit a little bit better here, just because Dina and Ellie's relationship has not been established yet, and this is kind of the tipping point for that, kind of the tipping point for the rest of the season, I'm guessing. I'm just kind of shocked that I'm enjoying the way they're telling this part of the story in the show more so than they did in the game. So yeah, hats off, the stuff with Issac, this whole scene, it really worked for me, and it's allowing me to kind of separate the game from the show in a way where I can really just love both. And of course, we end this episode by seeing the WLF and the Scars going at it in a battle, realizing the journey that these two have ahead in order to get revenge on Abby, who's supposedly part of the WLF. They're gonna have to go through hell. Dina being pregnant kind of changes everything, but doesn't, because she admits to Ellie she's with her kind of to the end of the line. She's willing to go through this with her, for her, because they're in love now. So yeah, overall, this episode really just worked and was really just good. The writing was there, the visuals were there, and I think the best part of this episode was the acting from Jeffrey Wright, from Bella Ramsey, from Isabella Merced. I mean, all of the people in this show are killing it in performances. I will say it kind of feels like we're flying through this a bit, and I understand because the game you can take like 40 hours to get through everything, whereas in the show you got an hour each week with what, like 6 to 8 episodes. I have a feeling of where they're going to be stopping with season 2 and starting up with season 3. I'm not going to really talk about that yet because I don't want to go into spoilers, but I'm really excited for next week considering the things that happen in the game, the infected and things of that nature. I think they can maybe surprise me next week and give us an Abby perspective episode with Issac, but I really think that we're going to focus on Dina and Ellie moving forward and save Abby for the 3rd season. I think next week we'll probably get introduced into some of Abby's friends that were there during Joel's death, and Ellie might get some revenge now. Let me know what you guys thought about this episode down in the comments. I read every single one. I most likely will respond. I have to know your thoughts. I'd love to talk with you about it. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all very, very soon.